The Texas Rattlesnake played a very strong role in wrestling's resurgence in the late 90s. If anything, he was the biggest contribution to professional wrestling, and a strong case for him could be made that Austin single-handedly saved the WWF. Were they going to go out of business? Probably not, but this man ushered in a new era of attitude, being the perfect poster child of a rebellious leader that followed nobody but himself. WWF positioned him as number one, but it felt so natural because of how anti-establishment and real Stone Cold was. The Rock fell into issues, being booed later on. Austin didn't, and it seems like it would be unimaginable for the WWF to retain their ratings and hold on the entertainment and cable TV industry if he were to go away. When late 1999 came around, Stone Cold had no other choice but to get surgery on his neck. This stemmed from the SummerSlam match with Owen Hart, where the King of Hearts hit a brutal pile driver that legitimately left Austin sidelined and brought a significant change to his in-ring style. It was a seamless change though, because Stone Cold's brawler style fit perfectly with his character. When it came down to it, Austin was able to have good matches just being the guy who had strikes, elbow, and the stunner in his arsenal. He would shine brightest when he had someone to sell his moves like crazy. Billy Gunn made him look even better with the selling. The Rock, Mankind, Triple H especially, who made those punches Austin dished out look like semi-knockout blows. I think a part of the reason why his matches with The Undertaker weren't the best was because of the selling situation. Austin's best matches and most entertaining were mostly the ones where his opponent would go crazy with the selling. This all ties into what I'm about to mention. So WWF didn't really have a problem when Austin left because The Rock was right there to lead the charge along with Triple H. Initially, Big Show was one of those guys, but he ended up being replaced by Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, and Chris Benoit. 2000 was a very successful year for the WWF, and this was all without Austin, who remained sidelined for 10 months. He did make an appearance at Backlash, but other than that, his status was mostly quiet throughout the year. Not even an appearance at WrestleMania 2000. The Rock was never a downgrade on Stone Cold Steve Austin, which is a testament to his ability, not to mention that 2000 was the absolute best year that The Rock had. This confirmed that Rock stepped up to the pressure and held things down, from an in-ring and business standpoint, while also considering the possibility of going to Hollywood. This man was doing it all at the age of 28. As the summer wound down, Austin's return was getting closer and closer. The fans missed him a lot, and it showed the moment where, with his back turned to the camera, received one of the loudest reactions in the entire show. The Texas Rattlesnake's return brought a lot of intrigue along with his comeback. The fact that he was run over at Survivor Series was another factor. The story wasn't explored much, barring a mere mention of The Rock's sunglasses being in the car. All that goodwill Rock had built with the fans was not enough for when Austin returned. This man was on fire, and he had yet to even enter the ring for a segment. WWF botched the whole storyline though, having Rikishi turn heel and in turn ruining his career. Maybe if he had a stronger push, he wouldn't be so worried about his kids booking on TV. I find it hard to believe that WWF would have messed up this story if it had happened in the beginning of the year. I just don't see it. Here though, the booking was changing, and you can notice how different the beginning of the year was compared to the end. The story lacked the real threats of Stone Cold, and it got to the point where Triple H was revealed to be the one who got Rikishi to do the hit and run. By having Triple H be the perpetrator, it automatically gave the story more credibility and also reignited the feud between Austin and Triple H. An incredible rivalry that brought something a little different to the table. At this point, Stone Cold reverted back to his old style of wrestling and was much fresher in ring. It would show a lot over the next year. It was all destined to lead to the Great One and the Texas Rattlesnake in Houston. WrestleMania 17, dating as far back to November of 2000, was hyped to be the biggest WrestleMania of all time. It was also the first show in nearly 10 years to be held in a stadium. They sold about 50,000 tickets the first day of release, which was a record for wrestling at the time, and almost broke the record gate number as well. Austin's storyline setbacks also made the sequel to the incredible feud with The Rock much more dramatic. He had just came off a loss to Triple H in the 3 Stages of Hell match. He did the job 2 falls in a row to the game. This made Austin look like a slight underdog in his match against The Rock. When you take away the horrible Deborah story, in a nutshell, this match was the most important in his career due to the previous events. He had a lot riding on this match. His reputation was on the line, and he just wanted to know if he could beat the most electrifying man in wrestling. It got to the point where Austin promised to do anything to win that title back, a title that hadn't been on his shoulder in about a year and a half. WWF realized the Deborah thing wasn't working and just had them go at each other, which was much better, and coupled with the promotion and hype involving plenty of run-ins, tag team matches, and of course the Limp Bizkit My Way song used in a promo for the match, there was nothing that was going to take away from the magic that was Austin and Rock 2. That is how you build up a sequel. I don't think you could go a month without hearing somebody talk about this match. And to glaze the WWF for a moment, but I think they had their work cut out for them in that regard. Because when you look at it from a 2001 perspective, this match feels like the most important event in the world. I always had so much respect for this match and the build for it. Not the Deborah thing, but everything else about it. One thing that would have made it better though is if Rock walked in as the champion from King of the Ring. I love Kurt Angle, but if The Rock came in as a nearly year-long champion, that would have made it slightly better and brought a little more intrigue. And again, WWF made sure to remind you that Austin would do anything anything to win that title. He said it himself. Paul Heyman reiterated this on commentary multiple times, but it couldn't have happened at a worse time. Why? Because Austin was still very over with the crowd. I don't even think many people really considered the possibility of a heel turn. He came to the Astrodome as a returning hero, whereas The Rock was the one who was booed. The match was a very memorable battle that brought out the very best in the Attitude Era style main event. It was a series finale for the Attitude Era in many ways. What separates this version of Austin and Rock was the fact that it was in a much bigger atmosphere compared to the others, of course. Rock was a face and much more of a bigger star, and of course a champion who put up a stronger and valiant effort compared to WrestleMania 15 and Backlash 1999. I understand why people give it 5 stars because the formula of that era was perfected to the best of its potential. To me personally, I think the 4 matches that did it so well, the Attitude Era style, were Stone Cold vs. Dude Love at Over the Edge 1998, Stone Cold vs. The Rock at Backlash 1999, Stone Cold vs. Triple H at No Mercy 1999, and of course Triple H vs. The Rock at Backlash 2000. I didn't include Cactus Jack and Triple H because that felt more like a hardcore match. It was a bit different compared to those 4. I think everything aligned on the night of WrestleMania 17. The commentary is probably the most memorable for a wrestling match, top to bottom. I'm not talking about lines, but I just want you to name 5 matches that had better commentary than this one. You have a better chance of naming 5 great Khali promos, and that's the thing, there is nothing wrong with this match. Oh, but this, you can't say that about this one, you can't. The Rock was literally equal to Stone Cold, and if Austin had him beat, it was by the tiniest margin. WWF had these two at the same time, and it was insane. Austin had clearly done his homework on the Great One, but even he was amazed that The Rock had so much resiliency and passion to keep himself in the match. Austin's morals were tested to the maximum here, and while he did sell his soul, it was always going to have to end up that way if he was going to beat The Rock for the World Wrestling Federation Championship, because this is a different kind of Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was not the same here as he was in the past. Vince McMahon was a difference maker here, with Stone Cold being somewhat appreciative of his help. He didn't refuse it. If anything, he welcomed it. And the McMahon-endorsed steel chair put the death knell in The Rock's title reign, and in turn made Stone Cold an ally of Mr. McMahon, a person he considered to be the spawn of Satan for multiple years. It feels so wrong looking at it if you watch the previous years. The fact that Austin actually turned heel and aligned with his greatest rival was insane. I think to understand heel Stone Cold is to look at his future. This man was often paranoid, and the explanation wasn't mentioned, but I'd say it's because he lost a year of his career and was starting to doubt himself a lot. So in turn, he violated his own morals and ethics to be the champion once again. And I'm not breaking ground with this mention because you could easily connect the dots. It's not like, oh, great realization. It's not any of that. It was a bad business move for the WWF at the time. They should have rode it out, but hindsight is always the victor in this scenario. I think you could say that it was strange in the moment as well, but we have to keep in mind that they probably had different plans at the time. It looked like Austin had a plethora of challengers: The Rock, Triple H, The Undertaker, Kane, Chris Jericho, Chris Benoit, Kurt Angle, but that's easier said than done. And to shill for it for a moment, Austin had a great story heading into WrestleMania 17, a feeling of bitterness and some anxiousness for what was going to be the most important match of his career, a match that would determine whether or not he'd still remain in the spotlight. Now, Stone Cold himself had a lot of confidence in this heel turn, feeling that he was running out of steam at the time. You have to understand, when you look at it from that time period's perspective, Rock seemed like number one. He was absolutely on fire. And even though the fans did love Stone Cold, to him, in his own mind, he felt like he wasn't the same. Here's what he had to say in an interview, and I quote, "Well, first of all, it was my idea to turn heel. If I could do it over again, I would have shook Vince's hand and told him I'm calling an audible, watch the stunner. And that's what I would have done. Some people say they were glad I turned heel because I got to show different levels and ranges and all that other stuff. Yes, I did, but the money was in Stone Cold Steve Austin being a babyface. At that point, people didn't want to hate me, and I tried like hell to get them to hate me. I did the best I could, but then again, it didn't matter if I had opponents or not. It just wasn't the right call, and it was my idea. Vince would have totally gone along with anything I called because he always told me I had the best game day gut instincts of anyone he ever knew. I felt it. But once I committed, man, that's where I wanted to go. Hindsight being 2020, had I called that audible, he would have been fine with it. Hey, it's Stone Cold Steve Austin talking, obviously. He had a lot of pull at the time, so clearly they probably would have thought to themselves, hey, why not just continue with the run? Because at the end of the day, the fans went insane for him in Texas. Houston, Texas, in the Astrodome, they absolutely went insane for him, and I'm sure Vince would have been okay with it. Austin was a heel, and WWF was so committed to make this work that they added another piece to Austin's heel run. So let's talk about the heel run. That's the longest intro I've ever done, probably, but let's get into it. Okay, the next night on Raw saw Vince McMahon officially align with Stone Cold Steve Austin. The Rock got himself a title shot inside the steel cage for later that night, but as for Austin, he teased beating McMahon's ass again, and this was their chance to fix things. But they didn't, and Austin went off on the fans. He explained that this deserved no explanation, and he was basically under the finger of McMahon talking about taking offense to Rock locking him in the sharpshooter. It's very unfortunate how things were because this man knew how to play the role of a heel. but because he was so loved, it was never gonna work. Not to mention, he was the second in command to the boss, as evident by me mentioning him taking offense to Rock Locky McMahon and the Sharpshooter. As expected, the steel cage match was good. It's often overlooked for obvious reasons, those being the fact that they had a classic the previous night and the circumstances of this episode of Raw. This episode was very controversial for the mere reason of how much it shaped the future of the WWF. Triple H interfered during the match and ended up siding with the boss in Austin, and again, this wasn't their best decision. They went 0 for 2 in 24 hours. The heels destroyed The Rock and left him laying in sideline for 4 months. He had to go to Hollywood to feature in the Scorpion King. The reason why this moment wasn't loved was because of how intense the feud between Stone Cold and Triple H was. These two were sworn enemies until they ended, and it was quickly forgotten for a partnership. Triple H should have been the heroic face if they were going to do something with each other. I know he shouldn't be a good guy because of his past, but if Austin was a heel, it was important to go in that direction. Both men were badasses in their own right, and this took away a lot. Still like the two-man power trip though in a nutshell. I'm just talking from a business standpoint. This heel turn affected the WWF a lot. It isn't often two main eventers of the highest order team up together as an actual tag team. Bruce Pritchard claimed that Triple H refused to turn face here, and one could guess why. It's probably because Austin was never going to lose his first feud. You're going to lose to him 3 times in a row most likely. Later that week on SmackDown, JR tried to get Austin to reconsider his decision of aligning with Mr. McMahon, but he ended up teaching him a lesson for getting in his business. They're trying their best to make him a strong heel, and as good as Austin was in this role, it was always going to be the #1 face where he'd prosper. The Texas Rattlesnakes heel run would continue with a bang as Triple H captured the Intercontinental Championship. This meant that the top villains had both of the big titles in the WWF. They teamed up in the Raw main event to face the Hardy Boys, and again, this was a great example of how much effort the WWF was trying to make in getting Austin to be a successful heel. First of all, the Hardys weren't going to get booed, especially in their prime era. We gotta mention that. These two were dastardly heels with Triple H assaulting her like she was a proper tag team champion. Austin destroyed her like her name was a rock on April 1st, 2001, and he dropped her with a stunner that didn't even do much because she was already knocked out. The two-man power trip brought a great question to the WWF. Who could stop them? And even though Jeff Hardy managed to score a huge upset win later that week on SmackDown to become the Intercontinental Champion, the game quickly made good on his mistake with some pressure from Stone Cold serving as motivation. Triple H felt that this loss was a huge embarrassment and a black mark on him that needed to be rectified instantly because he said that even the possibility of Jeff Hardy winning the title is stupid. The game reclaimed the title, and what followed was a ruthless beating on Team Extreme. Hope descended from out of nowhere with the Brothers of Destruction coming out. The heels didn't bother dealing with them, and like that, the WWF revealed their main event for Backlash. It's weird seeing because usually they would have a strong idea of what to do for the next pay-per-view, but this one was almost 2 weeks away, and until the end of the show, they didn't know what it was gonna be. Later that week on SmackDown, a two-man power trip caused trouble. They cost Kane the Hardcore Championship, a move that would backfire as the brothers forced William Regal to make a tag team title match official for the main event. Seeing as Austin and Triple H were vying for domination and power, they went for the tag team titles. Even though the heels interfered during the match, they weren't able to stop The Undertaker and Kane, who scored the victory to make a winner-take-all match official for Backlash. At the time, I think the WWF had the talent, but they were positioned in the wrong roles, so Austin couldn't really feud with Kurt Angle or Triple H. So The Undertaker would do. Triple H bragged about them taking out the brothers earlier that night and said that those two are busy healing, whereas they are standing as the two most dominant men in the World Wrestling Federation. Austin was up for the challenge now and called them out. They obviously weren't able to, and instead the Hardys came out. They challenged them, but then from out of nowhere, the Brothers of Destruction came out. They ended up having a big tag team match in the main event with the heels standing tall. Kane was still at a disadvantage with the arm, and Vince McMahon used this against him and The Undertaker, making them wrestle in handicap matches. As for the two-man power trip, their main event was against Kai and Tai. At least that's what it looked like. They cut this promo with Shane McMahon talking. It wasn't known obviously, but this is one thing to mention. Then The Undertaker spoke and said he saw 2 dead men walking in the ring. The brothers came out and sent them running. Good moment. The build was pretty short and showed that the WWF had changed a lot with Austin's heel turn. Nothing was the same, and somewhat falls into the problem of there being no real main character or protagonist. The Rock should have been there, but he wasn't around. With that said, it looks weird to see Austin wrestle as a heel who avoids direct conflict and tries to slow down the pace of the match, especially against The Undertaker, who always plays the role of the ladder in trying to wear him down and take him out with holds and have a dominant grip on the match. And this was prime Triple H. He did most of the work for them, and it's not a main event match, you'll remember, barring the fact that it was the brothers versus the two-man power trip. And that's the thing with this match. The thing with this match is that it had too much time for nonsense. A condensed version of this match would have been much better than what we got here. Because of the Attitude Era formula though, it was like the sun rising every day. It doesn't fail to deliver. You know, that's the thing about it. Like, yeah, it's long, but there's just this thing about these style of matches. They bring the fans into it, and that works every single time. It just required more direction with all that time given. Preferably time away from them. They could have been given half the time and done much better. The two-man power trip scored the victory, cheating to win, not to mention targeting Kane for most of the match. This saved The Undertaker for later on. Now, I really like the two-man power trip. It's like Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins teamed up again, or LeBron James and Kevin Durant became a duo. They're just too damn good. They're OP. The two-man power trip had plenty of power. No posable threat to challenge them, and with a wounded Kane, it only seemed like a matter of time before The Undertaker fell victim. Kane was supposed to challenge for that title, but the game took him out, leaving the WWF Championship main event questionable. Linda McMahon got involved and gave the title shot to The Undertaker. It was a nothing match that only served to show how far the heels would go to take out their competition. This led to one of the funnier segments from this entire heel run. I always loved this moment on YouTube when I was younger. I just remember watching it a lot. The Undertaker went after Stone Cold with a chain and he was furious. He threw him into a glass window and it led to Austin complaining while being blinded with the glass in his eye. Hello, boys! Triple H is panicking. The Undertaker's beating them up like it's WrestleMania and Stone Cold's being pummeled. The American Badass refused to be bossed around and used intimidation as a way to get in all of their heads. Austin's return later that night was chaotic. His ego was out of control and he had to see firsthand what The Undertaker was capable of in order to realize that it wasn't the time to deal with him. Undertaker was too big of a threat to deal with for the two-man power trip. They went into hiding while Undertaker searched through their locker room with a chain. Austin was incensed and irate over Undertaker being this much of a problem, and all he could do was complain to the boss. Now, Austin was no longer the badass and had his wife do his work and bring the Undertaker out of there. She came back with nothing but tobacco spit. This forced him to do something entirely different. After none of these things worked, Undertaker questioned his manhood and called him out. He had his belongings, and even then it took a while for Stone Cold to come out. It wasn't until Vince tried telling Undertaker to take off the chain and take the challenge like a man. He didn't waste time because it didn't matter to him, not to mention he's not a heel. Stone Cold Steve Austin's fight was perfectly optimized, but he clearly didn't expect such an intense Undertaker. McMahon used the chair on the American Badass, and Austin was about to fully take control when Kane returned after being taken out. This is a plan that they didn't prepare for, and Austin almost paid the price for it. Triple H wasn't in the arena, and Austin being outsmarted only led to him becoming more and more angrier. He called Undertaker a coward and threatened to beat up the fans. Since the brothers think they're all that, Austin gave them the chance to reclaim the titles. They bit off more than they could chew because it was definitely not something they thought of. So Austin went a bit deeper into things. A family emergency for The Undertaker called, and it turned the tag match into a handicap match. The WWF champion had no sympathy for both Kane and The Undertaker, and this was used to his advantage. The heels beat him up with no help from The Undertaker because he was away. Now, this was something that was very questionable. It's like, why would Undertaker leave? It's obviously because of a family emergency, but there was a lot of questions heading into SmackDown. The Undertaker returned later that week fuming over these turn of events as his wife wasn't in a car accident because someone prank called, not to mention said that her mom was hurt as well. Undertaker accused Austin and thought that he would stoop that low. Stone Cold, upon hearing the news, was confused. He heard about Undertaker blaming him for this and he was furious. Tensions grew after Stone Cold indicated that Triple H was behind this. He accused him of making these calls after the calls were traced to the game's phone. Not to mention, he was the one who ran him over. To make matters worse, Regal booked the match for Triple H against The Undertaker, and it was no holds barred. Regal refused to budge and treated Triple H like an evil person. Stephanie realized that Stone Cold used Triple H's phone on Raw, but it was too late, and the game was basically walking into hell. The Undertaker obliterated him, but then Stone Cold popped up on the Titantron. He called his wife. Austin revealed he was the one who was behind the phone call, and Triple H did end up being behind this, and the two-man power trip attacked. This didn't last long enough though because Kane with a chain ran in there. The build was good for what it was. The fans weren't still used to Stone Cold as a heel, not to mention he looked funny doing some of the textbook heel stuff, but they were trying really hard to get him to get booed. The Undertaker posed as a huge threat in the way of WWF dominance for Stone Cold Steve Austin. In order for him to exact this plan, Austin needed to eradicate the Brothers of Destruction. So let's talk about the match. Undertaker starts off with all the momentum, Attitude Era Brawl before it calms down with Austin working on the leg. He got comfortable in the match and busted open the Dead Man. What ruined Austin's momentum was him not realizing who he was dealing with. Because he had a significant lead in the match, Austin was vicious, but he couldn't keep the Undertaker down. He low-blowed him, used the chair, and even hit the stunner, but it wasn't enough. Similar to WrestleMania, Austin thought the chair was his best friend, but on this night it turned out to be a bitter enemy, with Undertaker inflicting what Austin did to Rock. Triple H came out and took a chair shot as well. It got to the point where McMahon had to intervene and take a beating to save Austin's title. Even took a chair shot, but Triple H calmed things down with a sledgehammer, leading to Kane coming out. This was crazy. They made it dramatic with Austin barely beating Undertaker and running out of there with his belt. These two don't have great chemistry. It got carried hard by the fans and the excitement of Austin possibly losing the title. Other than that, this match just happened. It really got better when the fans started believing a finisher was going to end it. Judgment Day, though, seemed to affect the two-man power trip more than expected. Stone Cold may have won his match, but Triple H didn't, and he lost his belt to Kane. Austin was happy about the win and told Undertaker that he isn't getting a rematch. Even then, he was looking for respect and standing like he's leading a church or something. Where's the colored windows? Chris Jericho interrupted the promo and he took it like Vince told him to job to a WCW mid-carder. Y2J was very popular around this time period. He was always somewhat of a threat, but never as much as he looked in this moment. He mocked him for selling his soul to Vince McMahon, but moved on and claimed that Austin did it because he was a jackass. This disrespect was glowing in his eyes. Jericho embarrassed Austin in a way he never ever had before, because Y2J said that he sold his soul to Vince, and that makes him a bigger slut than Stephanie. Chris Jericho challenged the two-man power trip to a tag team title match for the main event, and went on the attack. The Undertaker meanwhile told him that it isn't over. It wasn't about the title, and he threatened him. Undertaker warned him over mentioning his family, and Stone Cold had to agree with it. The heels didn't seem to be on the same page as it relates to the main event. That wasn't the same for Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit. This had been considered to be one of the best matches in Raw history, and there's good reason for that. Let's talk about it. Jericho and Benoit were a mix of aerial moves, submission holds, and especially coming from Chris Benoit, intensity. The crowd was really into this one. The faces were a great opposition for Austin and Triple H. They were great talent on their own, but relied on a chair to save them. This gave them a significant opening that allowed for Triple H and Austin to slowly dissect Chris Benoit and limit his offense, which was incredibly dangerous and efficient, seeing as he had Stone Cold down for the crossface. Jericho tagged in, but the referee didn't see it. Back in the ring, Triple H hit the pedigree, but the ref didn't notice, and at this point, this match hinged on the tag. Whoever had the momentum afterwards would go all the way. Chris Jericho with the hot tag overwhelmed the heels, and it seemed like nothing could stop him. Triple H saves him from the walls, and this was the moment where he tore his quad. The game still went on with the match like nothing happened, and even took the walls. Austin with the stunner to Benoit that makes you believe he got CTE from it from the cell, and Stone Cold couldn't deal with two men. He just couldn't, and Triple H made matters worse with the sledgehammer. 1, 2, 3. New champions. Everything around this match aligned. The pacing was so well done here. They shifted gears perfectly, which allowed for the match to flow well, and Benoit and Jericho felt like huge threats because this was a tag team title match. The fans were really into this one, and it had everything you'd want in a Raw main event. Stone Cold refused to take responsibility for the loss and called Triple H a selfish person for leaving him with Jericho in the ring. And this was the same man that told him he doesn't make mistakes. Then he started acting tough, saying no one gets to threaten him, and he mentioned this after provoking The Undertaker. Jericho and Benoit went through an intense TLC match later that week on SmackDown, but that didn't stop Jericho from challenging Stone Cold for the title. Vince, though, wasn't just gonna give it to him like that. Jericho did get a title match, but it was against the Big Show for the Hardcore Championship. This left Chris Benoit open, but McMahon gave him Rhino. Whoever impresses him will get the match against Stone Cold. Now, this was in Edmonton, so obviously these two were very popular. Benoit ended up getting the match, and it led to the big title main event. Now, this is one of those hidden gems. Benoit always had this thing about being a believable challenger, and it comes with his intensity and in-ring charisma. There's not many wrestlers that display this special ability when the bell rings. I'm not talking about his skill, but that feeling where everything you're watching, you're seeing a man that could actually win the match he's in. Even though Austin brought it in ring here, Benoit seemed like the one that had the edge. The fans were ready for it. They were ready to see the title change. Stone Cold was in for a fight, with Chris Benoit constantly throwing him around with suplexes and Germans. This man was too much of a threat, and he was starting to realize it. Nothing was working. Even the cheating backfired. So Vince did another screw job in Canada. While it was a dumb finish, this highlighted that Chris Benoit was too much of a threat. Where he wasn't even gonna bother costing him the title, he had to screw him over without a result. The match was great. It had a strong story with Stone Cold being overwhelmed with a challenge in front of him, and he didn't dominate much during this one. And Jericho and Benoit even jumped him after the match. Stone Cold had the night off later that week on SmackDown, but he wanted a fight. He felt offended over people claiming he never beat Benoit and that he was about to lose the title. This was basically people questioning him and his title reign. So he wanted a rematch against Chris Benoit for the title. Even Vince was in shock over this, but he had a plan for this. McMahon was a special enforcer for this one. Austin here got to show more, and he showed some of his very best here. He didn't dominate in the previous match, but that changed. It had a lot of excitement similar to their previous one, but this time around, Austin managed to avoid the loss. But he still had to deal with Chris Jericho for the title on Raw. Stone Cold had enough of these matches because Linda was making them official, and Mick Foley was the enforcer for this one. Once again, Stone Cold struggled with submission moves, and he was also bothered by Foley, so he threw Jericho into him. Austin worked on the arm with the fans fully behind Chris Jericho. This got chaotic with the ref being knocked down and Regal coming in and Foley accidentally dropping Jericho with a chair. Even then, he kicked out. So Austin hit the stunner to retain the title. The story was that Stone Cold was eventually going to run out of luck. The faces were still being punished and had to deal with Rhino and Big Show before their tag team title match against Austin and McMahon. They messed up here and underestimated the challenge, leading to Benoit and Jericho retaining the titles. It went from bad to worse as Stone Cold was going to defend the title against both of them at King of the Ring. He blamed Vince over this and complained before hugging him. This was the most random thing he did, but also shaped up his heel character. Up to this point, Austin was a no-nonsense heel. That changed here with him becoming more paranoid and often hilarious. He beat up Jericho in the back and looked worried over his title match. He went through hell in the last month dealing with them, and in order to prevent himself from facing Jericho and Benoit, he decided to make a petition. Instantly, the comedy aspect was showing. Stone Cold was being buddy-buddy with the guys in the back and even telling Kevin Kelly that he's a great interviewer. This guy intimidated the roster, sucking up to them, and of all the people to stand up to him was Spike, and that was because he called Molly a bimbo. So he ripped the petition and he was enraged like he destroyed his title. Austin whooped his ass in the main event and taunted Benoit and Jericho. They ended up coming out and he ran out of there. Austin confronted Spike again, and instead of going after him, he dropped Molly with the stunner. This all led to an exciting 6-man tag team match. Austin teamed up with the Dudleys to face Spike, Benoit, and Jericho. The faces once again reminded Austin of what's to possibly come at King of the Ring. They made him tap out with their holds, and it didn't bode well for the pay-per-view. Okay. The build of this match was basically them trying to convince you that Austin is done. He's up against two of the best technical wrestlers in the WWF with no help, which is something he's relied on for months now. Triple H was out. McMahon was going to accomplish nothing, not to mention he told Austin that if he didn't win at King of the Ring, their partnership was over. This is a matter of making the most with what you have. These two are the best potential challengers for Stone Cold. Rock was injured. Triple H was out and Kurt Angle had never been a face yet. So with these two, you get a great match out of it and a threatening feeling, especially with the triple threat match. Stone Cold heading into this one still believed there was a chance Vince would come out. So let's talk about it. The challengers just went after Austin, but cracks in their foundation began to show after Y2J dropped his partner with a spin kick. It was all about the title. Stone Cold couldn't figure out a way to answer this onslaught because these guys were much quicker than him, much more intense, and in storyline, he looked exhausted from these title matches in the last few weeks. He was dominating throughout this one except for a few moments. Austin even tapped out at one point to the double submission. That didn't work though since there needed to be a winner. Benoit and Jericho finally had a mini match here and Austin on the outside brought in a chair. All of a sudden Booker T ran in there and dropped him through the announce table. He messed up the spot and it was kind of awkward for him later on in the back. It seemed like a formality for either Jericho or Benoit to win the title at this point, especially because of how late in the match this happened. Benoit already needed surgery for his neck heading into this one, but it got worse after this back suplex, so they quickly wrapped it up with Austin covering him to retain the title. I thought this match wasn't as good as I remember it being. It was too long and didn't really bring a lot of excitement, which is funny because every match involving these three in the past month was great. Austin's run would see a major change the next night on Raw. So at the time, WWF was about to begin the invasion story. It was developing, but this episode of Raw served as the beginning. This was also when Kurt Angle became involved with the Texas Rattlesnake. Angle was treated like a clown, but Austin felt threatened by him. Not even because of his competitive nature, but Vince possibly being attached to him. He had lost his mind after King of the Ring. Now I'm talking about Kurt Angle here. He had a concussion, and he wasn't in the right frame of mind, and Vince wanted to take care of him for the night. Booker T was in WWF New York, and after some convincing, Stone Cold was ready to go after him. Angle was concussed, but still went. This was clearly a tactic from Booker T and Shane. Austin was so irritated over being called out and questioned. Shane instructed an invasion into MSG, and this kick-started the storyline. Booker T was initially positioned as the biggest threat to Stone Cold and the WWF Championship. Booker T had gotten into his head, and SmackDown was centered around this. Then he had Taz telling him to apologize to Michael Cole for a beating. He just randomly hopped up and was like, "Apologize for your actions last week." Now, Taz's stats were falling rapidly, so you know how this was gonna end. Then we have Michael Cole watching on with a blue face, not helping his friend, who took a beating for him, and he hopped out of there. Booker T used this to his advantage. Then we got the whole roster running in there like Austin didn't threaten to beat up a commentator, but when it's WCW, it's like, we're here. It's like 911 in the suburbs. Austin plotted for his next move, and this time he was much more prepared. WCW had the main event slot on Raw later that week, and it wasn't going to work for obvious reasons. Austin and Angle ran in for the main event, and the best part was when Bagwell believed he was on their side and they kicked him out of the building too. They were comfortable now. Vince was stressing over other things, whereas Angle was complaining about giving away his hat. That's what he was worried about. Funny moments involving these two. Angle and Austin were set to feature in the big invasion match against WCW. Jericho wanted in and they were hesitant, but after ECW merged with WCW, they had no other choice not to mention that the Dudleys and Rhino defected. Egos are in check for this one, and the Brothers of Destruction and Chris Jericho were added to Team WWF. A lot of funny moments with Angle and Austin. Now they were having fun, but Stone Cold had to be checked because McMahon wanted the old Stone Cold, and that crowd really wanted it. It was basically a sign that WWF should follow. Austin didn't want to stun McMahon, and he didn't want to become his old self. WWF struggled without Austin. Their champion was nowhere to be found, and he was drinking at a bar and lacked any interest in the situation. He started feeling a certain way and the fans were ready. Stone Cold returned to the fury that hadn't been seen in a while, and it was in a moment where WWF was outnumbered. With the glass shattering, that all changed. This was the most exciting moment in the WWF since WrestleMania. Jara said Austin parted the Red Sea, and it was like the old days, and he dropped everyone in sight with a stunner. One of Stone Cold's best moments in his entire career. For a moment, it felt like everything was normal again. It was natural, with Austin leading the charge as a face. The hugs were gone, and he was back to being the Texas Rattlesnake. If you thought that pop was great, SmackDown's follows suit and shows that this is all that WWF was missing. DDP threw his wife into the trunk to provoke Austin, and this led to an all-out brawl. Stone Cold as a face during this time was always going to be a positive. WWF lacked that true top face, and with this single mistake fixed, it allowed for things to get back on track. The Invasion pay-per-view was a massive success that was sold on the WWF and WCW main event. It was a magical opportunity for the WWF to do something here that was going to set the stage for one of the biggest storylines in wrestling history. But heading into it, there was already problems. The fact that Triple H and Chris Benoit got injured is one. Even though they weren't going to bring in the talent from WCW, those two would have been major figures when it comes to the story. Because the coalition, as they called them, could have used both men. I think regardless of the storyline, it was always going to be Triple H versus Stone Cold. Whoever is on what side depends on their mood, but judging by the way things did eventually go, that seems like the decision. But the story was all rushed and we heard many different talks about it. It's just if you had to book it to the best of its ability without bringing in people, Benoit and Triple H needed to be around. I think Triple H's inclusion changes a lot because his own story with Austin could have been dragged all the way to WrestleMania 18, especially with 2 world titles around, but it just wasn't going to happen. He was injured. But we had a great replacement. Kurt Angle. The match was decent, but it wasn't close to the other tag team match, which was at Survivor Series. Kurt Angle was the best part of the match, and then from out of nowhere, Stone Cold turned heel again and joined the Alliance. They missed again with this one because it was set up well for Stone Cold to take over as a face again. But they really wanted to do the Alliance storyline, and if they had to do it, someone has to join them. And Stone Cold joining them doesn't really make sense because he hates WCW. There was obviously a purpose, but that doesn't equal a good change. It also makes you question why they didn't make the invasion slow. If they start off one by one, eventually some of the mid-card WCW guys band together, Booker T comes in, DDP and the rest of the guys come in once they see their own guys, their own WCW mid-carders and upper mid-carders start to make a mark in the WWF. But it is what it is. Stone Cold explained his actions, saying he saw Vince hug Kurt Angle like he's something special and that he wants to replace him. This of course tied into his paranoid character, but also was the entire reason why he joined the Alliance. Yeah, there's logic behind the heel turn, but it should have been done. Then Stone Cold's paranoia led to him saying McMahon was calling The Rock. He's standing in the ring and felt unappreciated. Austin wasn't afraid of competition. Kurt Angle, though, was competition. Stone Cold made him seem inferior and dependent on him. Every time he had to help him and he called him a fraud for repping the US. The champion challenged him to come down and he obliged. Angle overpowered Stone Cold and sent him running. Kurt Angle thought he was the right guy to lead the WWF against the Alliance, the perfect kind of leader. He's got intensity, integrity, and intelligence, and he wanted to beat the conviction out of Vince to prove that he's the right guy. Angle demonstrated his passion for leading the WWF, but Stone Cold was still one step ahead of him. He interfered in his matches twice, but the second one didn't work too much as Angle managed to beat Booker T for the WCW World Championship. Angle was in disbelief over this, but it also showed that Kurt Angle was the man he said he was. Angle challenged him to a match at SummerSlam for the World Wrestling Federation Championship. He said he could wrestle better than him, better competitor than him, and even a better singer than him. Even though Booker T was doubting his chances due to eating Deborah's cookies, Austin fired him up and even helped him reclaim the title. Austin had some side quests during this time. He thought there was a chance Rock would join the Alliance, got hit by a cookie tray from his wife because he said her cookies are bad, and Kurt Angle just kept on winning. This guy was making enemies out of everyone. He was focused on the wrong things, whereas Angle was determined to win the WWF Championship. He even motivated the kids to drink milk. Meanwhile, you got this guy complaining about nonsense and stunning Lita. He was also starting to become a dictator. Austin tried to break Angle's ankle with a chair, but this only seemed to bring out the very best in Kurt Angle. I thought this was a great thing because it established Kurt Angle as someone that Austin had never faced before. Someone that was so driven and resilient. Angle was presented as the greatest threat to Stone Cold's championship. The face run was working great with the fans reacting well to him, and he was almost on par with The Rock. As for Austin, he was setting everyone straight while constantly saying what. I believe this was the first time he started using the what thing. He made fun of Hugh Morris and Raven. He straight up told them he sucks. Taz was the one who was trashed the most. He whooped them and used them as an example for the rest of them. Kurt Angle, meanwhile, had too much momentum, and Austin needed to lead by example and show everyone what he's capable of. The champion hosted the Austin Invitational. As a result of that, Kurt Angle was first on the list, but Austin preferred to face Scotty 2 Hotty. He trashed him and told him to take a beating and get behind him. This almost went bad, and to make matters worse, Kurt Angle ran in there and overpowered him. Taz had his issues with Stone Cold, but still saved him. Angle still managed to stand tall by the end of the night. The what catchphrase eventually turned into one of the most notorious in wrestling history, but the beginnings of it came because of Christian. Here's what Stone Cold had to say in an interview, and I quote, "People always ask me how I came up with the what thing. I called up Christian on his cell phone, and of course he didn't answer because it was me calling. So I left them this long-winded message where I'd say something stupid and I go, what? I kind of keep going, what? And keep going. By the time I hung up the phone, I left like a 2-minute message. And I was working heel at the time. I was like, I think I got something here. That's how the what was invented. And from there, wrestling was never the same again. A champion driven by paranoia and power facing a challenger seeking and vying to be the hero that the World Wrestling Federation needs. Stone Cold's increased paranoia coupled with his addiction to remain champion has led him to the Alliance. Austin didn't fully trust himself ever since his return a year ago, and it showed more and more after selling his soul. Doing it once meant he'd do it again, and that's exactly what happened. Joining the Alliance allows for him to have more henchmen and cronies who serve his greatest interest. High stakes, moments that an Olympic hero like Kurt Angle lived for. To him, this was an opportunity to cement his status as a leader and a hero that the WWF needs. I have a lot of love for this match. Let's talk about it. Okay, Austin tried to work slow, but this only brought out Angle, who hit 6 German suplexes. The champion managed to get comfortable though, and this led to Austin busting open the Olympic gold medalist. The blood only seemed to make this match. The blood only seemed to make Angle look more and more like a hero. Austin brutalized him, and even then Angle still locked in the Angle lock on the outside. Back in the ring, Austin was doing his best to reach the ropes, and this match sold their rivalry great. Like, I gotta say, this match was amazing. Angle was too damn resilient, even though it's better for him to stay down. The champion was starting to pull out some different moves such as the $1 Million Dream, but nothing was working when it comes to keeping Angle down. He kicked out of 3 stunners and was ready for more. Angle dropped him with the Angle Slam, but didn't have enough in him to go for the cover. Since nothing was working and he keeps running into the Angle lock, Austin dropped the referee. He followed with the next one and even hit the 3rd ref with the belt. Angle Slam, the title was his. And just when Angle thought he had the title, he was going to become the new champion, the WCW referee ended the match by disqualification since Stone Cold assaulted the referees. Angle was outraged. He went out and destroyed the ref's ankle while Austin ran away knowing he barely got out of there. Great match. The fighting spirit of Kurt Angle was amazing here. It was special in one of the best performances in his entire career. It was such a great phase here, with Austin treating him like a super threat. These two had chemistry, and it's a bit unfortunate that they didn't have many matches later on, not to mention their next matches weren't as good. I'm not talking about Unforgiven, I'm talking about their later matches. Stone Cold wasn't even thinking of SummerSlam because he had an appreciation night on Raw. They glazed him for 2 hours and he was happy until he saw Taz's shirt. If ECW Taz saw this, he'd die. He allegedly hated seeing people wear orange. What would he think of this? Then Kurt Angle came out in a milk truck. He sprayed all of them, and again, a tremendous moment. This is one of those memorable Raw moments because it highlighted just how funny, just how different, just how entertaining Kurt Angle was. This guy doesn't drink beer. He drinks milk. He's a bit corny, but it's a good kind of corny. Kurt Angle was very popular during this time, and I almost wonder if he would have reached his full potential in 2001 because I think he could have gone a bit higher. Austin had a random title defense against Chris Jericho later that week on SmackDown. This was a match that saw Jericho target the arm and easily make it a huge problem for the champion. Austin only won this one because of the ropes. Then he started wearing a sling because of that. Angle went after his tag partner Raven, and RVD opted to make himself Austin's partner. Despite all of this, he didn't compete in the main event but made his mark. And I'm talking about Austin, by the way. He stole Angle's gold medals and walked around like he earned them. Kurt Angle wants the WWF Championship, but Austin made things tough for him. He tried to make him get distracted by other things. Stone Cold constantly provoked Kurt Angle with the medals and made it seem like he was ready to hand them over. Angle, after failing NoFap, watched on as Austin told him to get on his knees and beg for the gold medals. Great promo here with Stone Cold saying he doesn't care about America. He pledges allegiance to the WWF Championship, and he threw the medals into the river. He was rewarded by his actions with a truck because the Alliance just couldn't get enough of appreciating Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was excited for this gift, but before he could even drive the truck, Angle came out with a pipe and dropped him. Angle took the truck and ran off. The Olympic hero with plenty of fury took Austin to a bridge and threatened to throw him off. He went to a higher bridge. He's like, hey, this bridge isn't high enough. You threw my medals into the river, you deserve much more than that. Angle wanted him to beg for it. He wanted him to apologize for his actions and beg for mercy. Angle even wanted him to cry. Stone Cold did cry, but Angle wanted more. He thought it was pathetic and nonsensical that Austin was crying or laughing, wherever the hell it was. He straight up gave him a challenge. He wanted a title match on Unforgiven. Austin accepted, but Angle still threw him in the water. I love this moment. Angle and Austin were always interested in the comedy stuff, and this was a funny segment. He's like, time to swim, and Austin's like, and he falls in a kiddie pool. Austin lashed out on Chavo for being late on SmackDown and was in a foul mood throughout the show. He was literally shouting he's gotta beat somebody's ass because he couldn't wait for Unforgiven. Stone Cold felt like Angle was trying to ruin his name. Kurt Angle refused to let Stone Cold forget his actions, and the champion said he didn't mean anything he said. He's like, I didn't mean the apology. Kurt Angle started calling him the waddle snake, wah, 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 and asked him about the moment he got pushed in the kiddie pool. He said that on Unforgiven, Austin's gonna see how stone cold he could be. The champion was enraged and said that the first person who walks through that door will take an ass kicking. It was RVD. Now, unlike regular heels and be like, oh, blah, 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 Austin straight up told him that tonight, his name is Kurt Angle. Rob Van Dam put up a fight here. Angle teased coming out, but this was a distraction that allowed for RVD to win the match. Obviously, he questioned Van Dam about this, and his bitterness showed here as Austin straight up told him that he doesn't like him. Then after RVD said the same thing, he hugged him and encouraged the others to have confidence. They were throwing shots at him somewhat, but when Tez said Kurt Angle's gonna kick his ass, he had enough. Stone Cold used the RVD match as a way to inflict damage ahead of Unforgiven. He threw Angle off the stage. This roughened him up and this gave him a neck injury that made things much easier for the Texas Rattlesnake. He even threw RVD off the stage. Why? No one knows. JR was just shouting that Stone Cold was a lunatic and he's gone insane and that he's paranoid. Angle had won the Hardcore Championship, but after this, Van Dam reclaimed it because of the 24/7 rule. Randomly just landed on top of him. He wasn't too happy about this, but kept his ego in check for the big tag team main event. Kurt Angle beat Stone Cold clean and he was looking paranoid. He just couldn't believe that he lost to Kurt Angle. He tried to convince himself that he was winning in Angle's hometown. Austin once again gave one of those talks to someone. He's like, "You gonna disrespect Stone Cold, Steve Austin? What?" He questioned Tori Wilson for hanging around Tajiri, a WWF wrestler, because she's with the Alliance. After he failed to save her, Stone Cold was confronted by Kurt Angle. Angle had the edge until Tez, who wasn't Austin's favorite, made the save, leading to a brutal pile driver on the concrete floor. Angle was stretchered out of there, yet once again came out to tell Stone Cold that he's walking out of Unforgiven, the World Wrestling Federation champion. He knew that Stone Cold was desperate and that he's the only man that could beat him. There was a cold, poised look in Kurt Angle's eyes, a man that had conviction that all he needed was a match because the rest of it was destiny. Great promo. I love this promo here. Kurt Angle showed his resiliency. He took a brutal pile driver on the concrete floor, returned later that night, and gave a good-ass promo, one of the best promos of his career up to this point. Out of all the men that faced him, Kurt Angle was the only one that had him beat on multiple occasions and a clean victory. Now, this event was held in Pittsburgh, Angle's hometown, but it was also the first pay-per-view after 9/11. He was not medically cleared for this one, yet Angle was the one that dominated early on. Explosive offense early on from Kurt Angle. He overwhelmed Stone Cold before stopping his own offense. It got to the point where Austin wanted to leave, and he had zero offense in for the first 10 minutes of the match. The champion's opening came when Angle wanted to pile drive him on the concrete floor. All it took was for him to go after the neck and he was easily in control. But Stone Cold Steve Austin's intensity was on full display here, with him showing Angle no mercy in his efforts to keep the title. Kurt Angle was very tough during this match, but it seemed like that resiliency was fading. Even then, he almost scored the victory with a stunner. So Stone Cold responded with the Angle Slam. Austin's biggest mistake was giving Angle the opening to lock in the ankle lock. He made him tap out. New champion. Kurt Angle is one of the only people to actually win in their hometown, but it wasn't gonna be like that originally. 9/11 really changed a lot and saw the WWF want to give the fans something positive. Kurt Angle was very popular at the time, and again, I have to say it, I still believe he could have been more than he was. This match was good though, but it was slightly different to the SummerSlam one. Austin was just going on and on trying to take him out, and that one here, it was calmer. What I mean by that is that they had turns in taking control. Of course, Austin had the edge, but both men didn't display that intensity during the later parts of the match. Following Unforgiven, Stone Cold disappeared for 2 weeks. Angle made fun of him and said that he's embarrassed over losing. Paul Heyman brought out a fax from Austin where he repeatedly said what while complaining about the fans supporting Angle. Stone Cold didn't return until the October 8th, 2001 episode of Raw, the night he was set to challenge for the title. Austin didn't speak much in the lead up to this match and was in a foul mood. The match was one of the longest in Raw history up to this point, and that was only 15 minutes. Every member of the Alliance was barred from ringside. Even Deborah was kicked out by the commissioner. Both men had a lot of intensity early on. Angle matched Austin's aggression, and it's weird watching this because Angle was the champion and their story mostly involved Stone Cold as champion, so to see the dynamics flip here was a bit odd. Austin felt that he wasn't the same without the belt in his shoulder. He went after Angle's leg this time around and he was becoming more of a problem for the champion. Stone Cold dominated and stopped Angle in his tracks every time he fought back. There was always that slight advantage, but even then Austin couldn't stop Kurt Angle, so he tried using a chair. Regal didn't allow it, and the match felt like it took a lot out of both men, which is always a good thing because it sells the match more. It feels like they're actually fighting for the biggest title in the industry, the WWF title, or as they call it, the World Wrestling Federation Championship. Stone Cold was losing it and almost cost himself the match. This led to the Kurt Angle comeback. He's reimagined and almost unstoppable. Austin had no answer to this onslaught and almost found himself on the losing end of this match. Angle wore him out with the belly to bellies, the Germans, so he low blowed him. Austin was ready to win the title, and this is the moment where the ref got knocked down. Ref gets knocked down and he brought in the belt. Regal comes in and instead of taking it away, he used it on Angle. JR was in shock over this. Regal joined the Alliance, and Austin goes to the cover. 1, 2, no. William Regal and Stone Cold really sold Kurt Angle's resiliency well. This guy looked unstoppable and Austin was raging. So instead of going for another cover, he raises him up, he's furious, and he hit a brutal looking stunner. 1, 2, 3. new champion. This man couldn't believe who he was dealing with, and the sense of relief showed greatly. He stared at Angle like, this motherfucker just can't stay down. Like, he had this crazy ass look on him, like, how you actually down this time around? Great match. I really enjoy Angle and Austin. They have a certain intensity and pace with their matches that I really enjoy. I also believe these matches did a lot for Kurt Angle to be considered one of the very top wrestlers in the WWF. It helped in that regard. Kurt Angle displayed a resiliency and resistance that only made him look much better than the others on the roster. I love the reactions from Regal and Austin. They treated him like he was a final boss. This was Austin's 6th title reign and his final one. I believe this was the record at the time along with The Rock. Stone Cold was happy about beating Angle and almost read a long speech, but to put it short, he said it's over. That's what it was. It's over is what he repeated while shouting what in between. Linda McMahon though ruined his night by firing William Regal as WWF commissioner and telling Angle it's far from over. Kurt Angle ran in there enraged and went after all of them. Austin was also looking to help Rob Van Dam win his match against Jericho later that night. He messed up and this caused tension between them. Then he called for all the Alliance members to come out, and again, Stone Cold was a dictator, so anything he said, jump, walk, run, whatever he said, they were gonna follow suit, they were gonna listen. He thanked Shane for helping him win the title, which was confusing because he wasn't even involved the previous week. But the reason why he's mentioning that is because of a previous title match Kurt Angle had where Stone Cold wasn't even involved. He even said he loved him and hugged him. He didn't give Rob Van Dam much credit for his part, and Van Dam was pissed over this. He was upset. And Austin started to remind him of the 2 weeks he was away. RVD was the one who was acting like the leader of the Alliance, and he treated him like a mid-carder and said 5 years from now he's gonna be a big star. Not today, not next year, but 5 years from now. Austin said he didn't like him but appreciated what he did for him. Then a new commissioner came out and instigated issues between Stone Cold and Rob Van Dam. He said Angle is gonna face Austin for the title at No Mercy, and then fully praised Van Dam and decided to add him to the match, further increasing dissension between Stone Cold and Rob Van Dam. It wasn't just about the gold, but also the position of leadership when it comes to the Alliance. It also tied into Stone Cold's increased paranoia as Van Dam used his own logic against him to accept the match. He just told him to reach for the stars and the champion was fuming. It's very important to mention that Rob Van Dam's popularity in 2001 was special. This was a man on the verge of breaking through. RVD was very unique and different to everyone on the roster, and to put it simply, he had a different kind of charisma and felt like a superhero. Just to put it very simply, that's what it was. Shane McMahon tried to use it as a way to say their chances of keeping the belt with the Alliance increased, but Stone Cold didn't want to hear it. WWF made it seem like the belt was his oxygen and every second without it was a struggle. Stone Cold calmed down on Raw and wanted to focus on his main event. Austin was throwing shots at Van Dam and telling the guys to not vote for the most popular choice to be his tag team partner. It was indicated to be RVD, but he ripped the paper. Everyone knew it was going to be RVD, but this was rigged like a Champions League draw. He said RVD got only 1 vote, which clearly wasn't the case, and announced that Booker T is his partner. He knew what was up but couldn't stand up to Austin. So Stone Cold got him a title shot against The Rock. This was a way for him to avoid Van Dam at No Mercy. Billy Kidman straight up told RVD the same thing and said he voted for him along with the rest of them. And Taz, the guy who had to be abused into riding Stone Cold, was angry about this. The match didn't go RVD's way. Meanwhile, the main event saw Rob Van Dam help Austin win the match after having the chance to connect with the 5-star Frog Splash. This changed a lot when it comes to their relationship. Stone Cold held a party for Rob Van Dam and felt convinced he was gonna do the right thing. If you're wondering what the right thing is to help him keep the WWF Championship at No Mercy. RVD came late to his own party while Austin was trying to hype him up as the man. Austin was the biggest fan of RVD when not even a week earlier was his biggest hater. He even handed him his watch as a gift. Paul Heyman fell into despair upon seeing who was in the same limo as Rob Van Dam. It was Mr. McMahon. Austin's mood flipped like Big Show's character does, and the champion questioned and interrogated him. Again, this man was a paranoid individual and has gotten worse over time, but he was reasonable here. There's reasons to think why Austin was paranoid here. To the rest of the Alliance, it seemed like an act of betrayal. Austin even took back his watch and gave him an ultimatum. Either he's with him or against him. RVD showed where his loyalties lie later that night, obviously. He went for Austin. Now I love this moment. It made RVD seem like a huge star in the making. He even had McMahon doing the pose. Like, that's one of the biggest endorsements you could have. Good build with Austin unexpecting RVD to be such a huge threat. They added Vince to the build as a way of showing maybe he's serving the WWF's interests as opposed to the Alliance. Stone Cold regaining the WWF Championship led him to a scenario he didn't consider. The opportunity of one of his own to take the belt from him. Van Dam was very over at the time. We gotta mention it again. This was a man just waiting for that title victory, and from that time period's perspective, it seemed like a matter of time. Now, this is a match I have a lot of love for, but I haven't watched it in a long time. Okay, let's talk about it. There was no one that had the advantage early on. Angle went crazy here, as did RVD, and they didn't have a lot of time for some reason, but they made the most out of it. Vince came out and blasted Austin with a chair, leaving things open for RVD. He hit the 5-star, but Angle broke the fall. Shane ran in there and tried to ensure a member of the Alliance will win it, and it was chaotic. Austin dropped him with a stunner. 1, 2, 3. I love how RVD doesn't have enough in him to kick out. It's a small thing, but it's nice. Good match. It was pretty short though. It's just they didn't construct something fully great. I think it could have been a bit better than it was. It's just they didn't have a lot of time. Plus the whole alliance drama, they just added that in there and they didn't bother making it a much better match. But it was good. Austin didn't appear on Raw the next night, but there was a big development in the Invasion storyline. Survivor Series was going to be the end. Winner take all. The Alliance against the WWF. Stone Cold returned in a foul mood later that week on SmackDown, outraged over the Alliance having problems from within. It seemed like Austin was teasing a face turn. The fans were ready for it, but they quickly dashed your hopes away like that. Austin didn't like the fact that the one day he's gone, they're fighting. He was calling the shots and even booked an Alliance Battle Royal for the chance to face Chris Jericho. It was indicated that Austin wasn't looking for the best when it comes to the Alliance. He complained about them fighting, yet he was doing the same thing. The Alliance on Raw said that there was going to be a new member of the group and it was going to be someone from the WWF side. Not to mention, it was someone in the ring. Angle confronted Austin about this and Austin told him to join the group before it gets worse. The Olympic hero believed that it was The Rock and he saw it differently, because why would he be in the locker room? Later that night, it ended up being Kurt Angle. He joined the Alliance. This was strange. It makes less sense than the Austin one, because this man was in bloody battles with Stone Cold. Why would he join him? There was more to this story, obviously, but when you look at it in the moment, it looks pointless. It should have been Jericho. Kurt Angle even called Stone Cold a role model later that week on SmackDown. Austin was proud of him and even got his gold medals back. He became a bigger dick rider than Taz, and that's saying something, because that man was doing the absolute most. Later that night, Austin had to defend the title against The Undertaker. The American Badass was a tough challenge, with Stone Cold being overwhelmed throughout the early parts of the match. He tried running away. Austin dropped Undertaker with a stunner from out of nowhere and finally took control. The champion pummeled The Undertaker, and even then he didn't want to work hard, opting to bring in the chair. This backfired, leading to another brutal chair shot. Kurt Angle ran in there and caused the DQ, and they laid him out and celebrated. Okay, so basically, Kurt Angle was the big threat at this point. Survivor Series was originally supposed to include Vince versus Shane, but he ended up being replaced by The Big Show. The WWF's hopes were fading heading into Survivor Series, but Vince decided to reveal something huge on Raw. He said someone huge is going to defect to the WWF. Stone Cold Steve Austin. Fans were hyped, obviously, because not only did it mean that Stone Cold would join Team WWF, but he would become a face. McMahon's hopes increased after Austin said he should be himself and stunned him. The guys in the back stared at him in disappointment. Austin shouted at them, but it did nothing. And again, this tied into Austin's whole DTA thing. Then they started thinking about the possibility of Kurt Angle being the one to leave the Alliance because he was the one that just joined, but it was mostly leaning towards the Alliance believing Austin was defecting, and he had to try and convince them that he's a leader. He had to threaten them to trust him. That's what it got to. Taz, though, was the one he focused on most. Taz stood up to Austin and told him that the Alliance didn't like him. He made things worse by making Austin admit he lives by the motto, don't trust anybody. Taz turned it into don't trust Austin. He stunned Taz and beat him up while they walked out. Stone Cold's erratic behavior led to him going insane throughout the show. He actually interrogated RVD and questioned him about being the guy who was with WWF. It took a while for Angle to confront Austin, and already the questions were asked. Stone Cold asked him the same question. He thought it was strange how they fought for 3 months, then Angle starts hugging him. So because of this, later on that night, Austin stunned Angle. This proved that his paranoia was at its worst. Survivor Series was basically being sold on will Stone Cold come home or not, and the finale of the whole Invasion storyline. That's basically what it was. He faced Taz on Raw and obliterated him. Shane had to run out there and tell him to stop, and the tensions were very high between Angle and Austin. And this came at the worst time with Survivor Series ahead. Shane said there was nobody defecting and that it's a tactic from Vince to create dissension. But there was one more thing to deal with. Now, The Rock's return had happened about 3 months earlier. Since then, there was zero interaction between Stone Cold and the Grey One. The one time they interacted was the night Angle joined the Alliance. But other than that, they never interacted and spoke about their storylines or their feud in the past. The Rock called out Stone Cold and said he didn't forget about WrestleMania and the next night. If you're wondering what next night is, he's referring to the steel cage match, of course. The Grey One said he hopes Austin will defect to the WWF so he could whoop his ass in the WWF. And then when he was doing his quote, Austin took his mic away and said he wasn't gonna let him breathe all over him, and tried to steal his catchphrase. Rock would not let him finish and stared at him like he stole his movie role or something. Like Austin was now the Scorpion King and he felt so offended by it. The same thing once again. Both of them were getting annoyed with each other, and since Rock didn't like it, he brought back the bottom line quote. These two were provoking each other but didn't want to battle. They were very passive-aggressive, basically. Austin wanted to do something that was much tougher. It's like, I can whoop your ass in this ring, what? But he wanted to do something else. They started singing songs and having fun, but then The Rock told him he'll never forget and dropped him with the rock bottom. This felt like some bloopers into another world we're not familiar with. I loved it though because it felt different. Personally, I do like the calm segments and comedy stuff in wrestling, and watching this run, I noticed WWF implemented them a lot around the summer. More so than previously, because there was a lot of funny stuff in the Attitude Era, but in the summer of '01 and onwards, they were focused on comedy a little more than often. This was very entertaining and was a segment carried by their charisma and talent. Jericho and Angle ran in there, and this led to a big SmackDown main event between those four. Now, I think you guys are very familiar with this match. Everyone got hit by a finisher, and all of this to establish what Survivor Series means. Stone Cold was the one that ended up being the last man standing, and he looked incensed. He looked pissed, but just in a moment, like from out of nowhere, Vince comes out, and this caused a change of attitude in Stone Cold. Vince and Austin were smiling at the same time, giving more intrigue to Survivor Series. Okay. Now it goes without saying, the Invasion story was a missed opportunity. It's not a unique take, however, this is one of the best Survivor Series elimination matches ever. It's just funny how the Invasion story ended with Austin and Rock. It's a bit ironic, but you can't have it any other way in this situation. Who better than Rock and Austin for the finale to establish the end as a dramatic and unpredictable one? It ended up being Kurt Angle who was a difference maker. He blasted Austin with a belt and revealed himself to be the secret member of the WWF. This led to the end of the whole Invasion storyline, which was much needed because even though this was a big finale, this pay-per-view didn't draw as well as they hoped. The next night was basically like a reset, and it's important to mention. Kurt Angle felt a sense of pride being the one who saved the WWF. He began parading around looking for credit and telling everyone he was the one. The Rock pushed into everything, asking, when did he construct this plan? And called into question Angle's loyalty because this man blasted them with chairs. He said that it was a good thing he did all of that and that it didn't matter. Angle was crying about getting no respect, so McMahon asked him if he wants to be the WWF champion. And it was time for the coronation. Vince was the only one who expressed his gratitude for Angle's actions. Since Austin didn't show up, McMahon wanted to strip him of the title. To him, the WWF needed a champion with dignity, with class, with credibility. And Kurt Angle fits all of those things. Before he could give the title to Kurt Angle, Ric Flair returned to the WWF. This was his first appearance in 9 years. Now, the invasion was over and for good reason, but Flair's return was tied into something that was originally a part of the invasion, that being a brand split. Flair revealed that Shane and Stephanie sold their stock to him and that they're now business partners. Meme unlocked. And there's Stone Cold. He pummeled Angle and sent him and McMahon running before reclaiming his title. There was no explanation for the face turn. It was very messy to begin with, the fact that he turned heel in the first place, and this was them going back to how it was. And most of the people accepted it because it was the old Stone Cold. So there it is, Stone Cold's heel run. Now this heel run was very odd. The reason why I say it's very odd is because it just came from out of nowhere. They had their reasons, obviously, to turn Stone Cold heel. He wanted to turn heel, but it ended up being a bad business move. Another part of it is the fact that while Austin was a good heel, he didn't have a lot of rivals. The biggest rival being The Rock disappeared for 4 months, and the second biggest rival was Triple H. He got out with an injury. They were actually supposed to have a long program together leading into SummerSlam, I believe. It was basically supposed to be like Kurt Angle and Austin's feud. So when you have all of these things, you rush an invasion storyline and all that, it's no wonder why the business didn't succeed. WWF was not always going to be super successful and be in a boom period and all that. It was bound to end. This just accelerated that. Stone Cold, though, was very entertaining here. I will say that I really loved the Stone Cold character here because he got to do a lot of different things and was very entertaining. Just because he didn't draw doesn't mean I'm gonna dislike it automatically. You could like it or hate it, that's your thing. Personally, I really like this heel run because it showed something different. He could have gone on and been the top face and had big feuds with the likes of Triple H, Chris Benoit, Undertaker, whoever, but he decided to go with something that was much tougher and more of a struggle. The fact that he sold his soul to Vince was very controversial, but again, there's reasons for that. This guy became paranoid. He's worried about losing his career. In-ring Austin was great here. He was very, very good and much better than he was in previous years because he got to work a bit differently. You know, they'd be like, oh, Austin wasn't the same after 97. Yeah, he wasn't the same, but 01 deserves its mention. But there's a lot of segments I didn't talk about here where he was just entertaining and doing some random ass stuff. Like, he had a lot of side quests during this run, which were hilarious to me. He's arguing with his wife. He's like, what? Kurt Angle yelling, shut up at random people. It was funny. Then he added the what thing from out of nowhere because of Christian. And it's just funny looking at it in the beginning because he looks like a crazed person. He's like, you gonna talk to me like that? What? Well, yeah, I really liked a lot of his promos here. His character was good. I don't have a single problem with this run except for the external sources, you know? Like, a lot of things could have been better, his rivals, all that, but there was injuries. He can't do anything about that. I pledge allegiance to the flag. He's mocking Kurt Angle like that. That was funny. Saying he pledges allegiance to the WWF Championship instead. I think it was great. It's just, it wasn't at the right time. He could have done it another time, but it was a good run. I don't see why I should personally hate on this run because he got better in ring. He got to show something different with his character. His feud with Kurt Angle was amazing. Everything about it. It's just the booking was weird with the whole heel turn again when they could have used that as an opening. But Austin did get booed when this feud with Kurt Angle. You know, like obviously the fans did cheer him at times, but during his feud with Kurt Angle, Angle was the full-on babyface to the fans. They loved him way more. So yeah. Another thing I want to add is that the criticism for this heel turn comes from the fact that in some ways it ruined the Stone Cold character. Because of the way the storyline was booked, Austin couldn't just automatically turn face, which in itself was kind of a loose problem. But because the fans loved him so much, it didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but also it proves just how complicated this heel turn was because he couldn't just flip like that and turn face. They didn't even want to build a story for him. I like that as a run in a bubble, but everything surrounding it makes it worse than it is. Austin worked very hard here. He was a great heel. He was objectively, straight up, without thinking of the Stone Cold character, he was a great heel here. The only problem is it happened at the wrong time. Other than that, if you look at this run in a bubble straight up, I think you'll like it, but it's kind of hard to if you know about the Stone Cold character previously and how much of a downgrade it was. The biggest problem is of course him signing with Vince McMahon, which they explained and it makes sense, but it's just strange how he would actually do it. Like there's logic for it, the way the story was booked, but it's just strange how they did it. But then you go from a vicious heel, which he was in the first 2 months of his run, to a guy who constantly complained, was hugging people, all that. It felt like a huge departure from the Stone Cold character. I do think the run would have been better received if he slow burned his way into a heel turn, and eventually if he were to side with Vince, he wouldn't do it instantly. That probably would have gone down better. But everything surrounding this run makes it worse than it is. Now, my favorite match from this run was definitely the Stone Cold versus Kurt Angle match at SummerSlam. I think that match did a lot for Kurt Angle. It showed that he was very resilient and someone that could not be stopped. Great match, even though it ended in a DQ. One of the best matches to end in a DQ, for sure. I thought Austin was great here. He did something different, and again, if you do something different, it might work or it might not work. In this case, character-wise, it worked, but drawing-wise, it didn't. So there's that. So yeah. Alright, what you guys think of Stone Cold's heel run? Please comment down below. And that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the superplex on the like button. Make sure you hit the Luthes press on the like button and perhaps the Stone Cold Stunner on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.